to the Tyrant-Den.
We are Saturday. I'm going to do a couple other things. There's actually like more things than I have time to react to that I kind of want to get reactions and do. So I obviously, because it's right here, I'm going to do the Crimean War Part 2 right here because I did the first one. Only vaguely remember it. It's been a long week. But if I have time, I absolutely want to react to Matt Pat's theory about Pizza Tower. I don't know anything about the game Pizza Tower other than the fact that Cracked.com apparently immediately felt the need to do this insane Wario-based pizza guy teaming up with Mario thing, which made no sense at all. So I would like to understand as much as possible what's going on there. Anyway, if it bleeds, it leads. The Crimean War Part 2 by Extra History.
Port of Sinop, Ottoman Empire, November 30th, 1853. Admiral Osman Pasha involuntarily ducks as the shell screams overhead, feeling his insides vibrate as it detonates. Hot iron tears into the sails and decking of the frigate.
Very nice little artwork they did here. Loving it.
Carrying buckets to put out the fires the shells have started. They're cut down by shrapnel from the next volley. He's heard about these guns. Cannons that fire explosive shells rather than the solid cannonballs his fleet is equipped with. Their use is still militarily controversial, but it seems the Russian Navy has clearly decided that they are the future, and Osman Pasha's fleet is the first to experience that future. Limping from a shrapnel wound in his foot, he orders his flag.
I'm still not entirely sure whether or not the bombards in Fallout 4 are supposed to be the exploding kind.
Ship to run aground so it will not sink. His fleet, much of the Empire's naval power, lies burning, and yet the Russians continue to fire.
Dun 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 dun.
Thanks so much to Brilliant for helping us tell today's historic tale. When Tsar Nicholas I sent his troops across the Danube,
I really like how they do the art
he
for
was
this show.
sure that the European nations wouldn't come to the Ottomans' defense. And honestly, he had good
Glorious
reason to believe that.
mustaches.
Back in 1844, he personally met with the British government and signed a secret memo between the two,
Nice teeth.
agreeing on a partition of the Ottoman Empire were it to fall. Because they were both alarmed by the French economic and colonial expansion into the Middle East, and he'd raised this agreement with the British in the days leading up to the outbreak of war. And the British
I can
didn't
see myself
intervene,
doing that one of these games.
at first. While Britain and
Ooh,
France had
Newcastle.
expressed private support to the Ottomans at the outset of the war, their first actions when the fighting started was to hold a conference between Britain, France, Prussia, and Austria to
some
create
things
a
really do never
diplomatic
change.
solution acceptable to all parties. Now, this was how the Concert of Europe had been designed in the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars, gathering to resolve disputes via diplomacy rather than combat. And while they debated, they insisted Russia could defend its territory, but take no aggressive action.
Insert Queen Amidala talking about how she needs to do something to save her people while you debate this in a committee.
This time, however, the Concert of Europe failed. Ottoman Sultan Abdul-Majid I rejected their initial peace proposal as too beneficial to Russia, and then when they rewrote it, Russia rejected it as too slanted toward the Ottomans. And truth be told, not all of these
Means they're
governments
both
really
probably
wanted
fine.
to broaden this conflict. For example, Britain's ruling party would rather the Ottomans defend themselves, and the Ottomans worried that if the French and British had to save them, it would open the door for these stronger allies to push them around as junior partners. But the Battle of Sinop changed all
That's
that.
fair.
Not only had Russia taken the aggressive action the concert had forbid, its new dominance of the Black Sea was seen as a
that's a cool
challenge
picture.
to British and French naval power. Increasingly, Britain thought war might be necessary to prop up the Ottomans, lest Russia consume it, upsetting the balance of power.
Oh, I remember that. They blindsided me with suddenly using Clifford last time too. Ooh.
And while Nicholas didn't
The
see
big
this
red
coming,
state.
truth be told, he didn't fully grasp how Britain functioned. As an autocrat who never bothered studying other governments, he didn't get the role opposition parties and public opinion could play in shifting.
And what you see right here is why, when you play Crusader Kings 3, military education is literally the least important one for your leader. You are always going to have somebody else basically to do that for you. It is far more important to have good stewardship and diplomacy.
Policy. To him, he'd spoken with the British royals and their political leaders, set out a mutual plan, and that was going to be it, right? But what he
I almost
underestimated
wanna
most
hug
of all
this guy.
was the free press, which revealed itself as a far more potent weapon than the explosive shells used at Sinop. British and French newspapers cast the Russian victory at Sinop as a
Massacre.
massacre, quoting a British witness who claimed that the Russian fleet continued to fire, even when the Ottoman ships could no longer fire back. Though this was a pretty common practice in naval warfare, the virulently Russophobic British press, already known for printing conspiracy theories about Russian plans to dominate Europe, made it a celebrated
Some
cause.
things
And
never
of course,
change.
Sinop was exactly the kind of aggressive action Russia had been warned against. Public opinion swung toward the war party in Parliament, and after Russia ignored a British and French ultimatum to withdraw from Ottoman territory, the two declared war on March 28, 1854. Again, the press
Such
was
cute art.
decisive. In previous wars, recruiters would have to entice men to enlist by offering upfront bonuses, but now newspapers largely did the work of
Oh,
whipping up nationalistic fervor
dang.
and
And that's going to set you up for World War I, too, where people were just signing up at first for a long while. Oh, incidentally, if you haven't watched the original version of this first, go do that until they inevitably get the publicity for this anyway. Like, I'm sure a couple months from now it won't matter. But I don't know why you're starting here with me instead of just watching their actual thing. Or, Greg, there's some better guys than me who actually know stuff about this history. I know nothing about the Crimean War.
trumpeting the glories to be found on the battlefield.
I only know it sounds kind of like
across the
things
UK,
happening
young
now.
men flocked to sign up for adventure, leaving their villages and cities in smart uniforms and singing lighthearted songs.
Purina
that
Cat
immediately
Chow for
breaks you.
fun-loving adult
And they probably
felines
won't have
and
commercials.
cats
I'm
of
gonna have
all
commercials.
ages.
I'm not making enough money off of this. That's to say, like $5 a month to justify having YouTube Red. Not even that. Like if I'm making 50 cents a month, I'll be like, oh, this is enough to invest in.
Nominate them today and feel the love.
So you get it's an unedited,
However,
it's a
the royal
raw,
navy was already
unedited
engaged
take.
in the
So I'm
conflict.
not expected to actually
Before
make money
joining
off
the
of any
war,
of this,
the British and
obviously.
French fleets had moved into Turkish waters
Oh,
and
yeah.
then the Black Sea in order
2023.
to serve
Now's
as
the
a
time to get into
deterrent.
reaction
But it was
videos.
in the Baltic Sea that they struck the first blow.
Anyway, they're continuing. The thing that makes this really interesting to me as a naval battle is that it's a naval battle fought in the Black and Baltic Sea, which just never happens, except now, obviously. And probably a lot of times in the past, like you never think about the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea, the two Bs, the BBCs.
A massive Anglo-French fleet hit the Baltic in April, and within days was in sight of the Russian capital of St. Petersburg. However, after trying the fortress protecting it, and finding its defenses too formidable, the fleet decided instead to destroy the smaller fortresses and ports around the Baltic, burning supplies and threatening the capital, so Russia was forced to retain a large army in the area rather than sending it south. The Russian Baltic fleet, terrified of this larger force, mostly huddled around the shore batteries near St. Petersburg, relying instead on their new invention of sea mines to damage their enemies. Now, it's important to remember that this campaign effectively won the war. The Allies had bottled up
Okay.
Russia's Baltic fleet, tied down
Pay
huge
attention,
numbers
then.
of troops, and instituted an economic blockade that would, more than anything, force the Russians to eventually
Excuse
sue
me.
for peace. And better still, they'd
I don't know
done
why
it
I'm doing
with
this.
few
I'm just burping into
casualties
this
on
more.
either side. So they were considered heroes, right? Oh, they weren't? Oh, man.
Of course
In
not.
fact, the British press printed scathing articles that mocked the Allied commanders and accused them of cowardice for not attacking St. Petersburg. And this lack of major battles ensured that the Baltic campaign would go largely unremembered, while the less
How often does good military practice result in boring military practice? Well, I'm sure you're doing a great job. It's just, it doesn't make for a good movie, you know?
strategically vital battles on the Black Sea would become enshrined in stories and poems due to the heroic amounts of bloodshed. Yet at the
Helps that the Black Sea is just, name-wise, immediately more interesting than the Baltic Sea. Unless Baltic is like Norse for blood spurting out of the heart dramatically, but I doubt that, and it wouldn't matter because we speak English.
At the same time, the most consequential land battle of the war was going on, and the public largely didn't know it. In May of 1854, Russian forces drove south toward Constantinople, knowing that the Allies were on their way, but had not yet deployed in force. They aimed to take the Ottoman capital and bring the war to a speedy conclusion. But in their way was the
So
Ottoman
now I like the
fortress
green and
of
orange of
Silistra
those
in what
uniforms.
is now Bulgaria. With the French and British still marshalling their forces, unable to help, a force that eventually numbered 90,000 Russians besieged the 15,000 Ottoman soldiers in the fortress. The garrison were mostly Egyptians and Albanians.
Okay, now the logic states there that normally even a much smaller defending force is going to have the advantage. So to have a larger defending force than the attacking force, but something interesting happens, that immediately piques my interest.
Ordered by a half-dozen British advisors that took command when the Ottoman general was killed by a shell, his blood splattering the prayer mat where he'd been making his devotions. For a month and a half, the Russian army pounded Silistra. Inside,
I'm not sure what... I like to do this thing a lot, not because I'm Catholic, but because I really like the good, the bad, and the ugly. But like, I don't know, what gesture should I be doing when they're Muslim? You know, what gesture should I be doing when they're Jewish? Because goodness knows that happens. The Jews go through a lot of stuff. Oh, we all do, but like, you know.
it was hell.
Yeah.
But from a bluff, largely outside the line of fire, a young Russian artilleryman watched. June
So you do,
21st,
like, triangle,
1854, just
triangle?
outside Silistra. The artilleryman
No
looks
idea
on
from
enthralled as the faraway men kill each other. A young count, he had gambled away his fortune and joined the army to avoid his creditors.
Ah.
And while he enjoyed the action of military life, he thought that perhaps writing was the path for him. That's what he mostly does at Silistra anyway. Stands on the bluffs, watching the battle, reflecting how strangely entertaining it is, and how oddly beautiful the night becomes, as shells burst and cannons stab orange into the darkness. His name
This guy
is Leo
disturbs me.
Tolstoy, and his impressions of this
Oh, this guy
will bring him
disturbs me more now.
unprecedented literary success and create one of the greatest novels of all time. However, now, here, he's thinking of battle. Soon, they will storm the fortress in their final attack. Oh, what will he witness? Will he live? And if so, how will he describe it in his letters? Suddenly, their officer shouts. He has new orders. Limber up the guns. We're marching back north. But why? Why now? Tolstoy asks. Aren't they finally about to win? It's an order directly from Tsar Nicholas.
So no, they're not.
You just have to rise to the occasion.
The new Motorola Razr Plus.
They really start that commercial with a phone call? Like that?
Turns
That
out,
just
Austria
makes everybody
has ceased its
anxious.
neutrality and massed 250,000 troops along their border. They intend to rush into the Russian-occupied Balkans and Danube region, pushing the Tsarist forces out unless the Russians leave peacefully. That territory will now be occupied by a joint Austrian-Ottoman force. Given that the British and French have landed 70,000 troops at Varna, the Russians can't win. So, to avoid them being trapped
really wonder
between
what
two
the
forces,
combat
Tsar
along the
has
Danube
pulled
was
them out.
like.
The drive towards
that's-
Constantinople has been cancelled.
Between the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea, the Danube River is really the third significant body of water there.
Not by battle, but by maneuver and diplomatic threat. Tolstoy writes of his disappointment, but in truth, he need not fret for long, for he will see combat soon enough in the bloodiest theater of the conflict, a gory and grinding battle on a peninsula that will give the war its name, Crimea. You know, Zoe, there is a lot of info to unpack.
Okay, I'm already kind of seeing like the difference here between the Crimean War and World War I, where I don't... You didn't get a lot of people at World War I even, like, manning the, because they weren't cannons anymore. They'd be, the artillery. Being like, oh, that's so pretty. That from a distance, or there's still action measure, like, obviously, horrible death, and it was a non-modern war, so more people were going to be dying of disease, which is the worst way to go in a war. You know, like, barring really specific and painful but not immediately fatal injuries, generally it's going to be the disease that's worse. But like, you're still kind of getting that adventure here. It sounds like. Definitely still some traumatic adventure, but compared to how things would change when you hit the trench warfares of World War I. So, I mean, you're getting an interesting thing, because like here you're seeing them talking about, oh, the adventure and the inspiration of all going there, and then kind of getting it, whereas, I mean, the famous writings we got coming back from World War I wasn't War and Peace. It was, I'm going to write a cute little unrelated poem about how beautiful God and olive trees are, or whatever. Alright, this is going to be a commercial in the commercial video.
Here, but that's part of the reason why I love working on extra history, you know? Because it helps me with that lifelong goal I have of just trying to learn something today that I didn't know yesterday. And I don't think I'm alone in that. Something I absolutely love about this community is that
Thumbs
so
up,
many of you
obviously.
are passionate lifelong learners like me. But then again, if
Yeah,
you are
that's
also
fair,
like
that's fair.
me, you know how hard it is to find that time to better your brain. Luckily though, Brilliant was built for busy
No,
people.
'cause
with
that's most of what I splurge now. I've passed my binge, not splurge. That's most of what I watch right now. It's videos like this when they're available, and reaction videos. Often to these. Anyway, it is going to be more about One Dream. I'm sure One Dream is great. I can't afford it, even though it probably cost me nothing, and even less if I do this. So do this, because support Extra History. We love Extra History. And if you even kind of begrudgingly like this, give me a like, a comment, a subscription, share to your friends.